Welcome back to another episode of We Got Your Mac. I'm Victoria Barber and I'm joined today by Scott. Hi Scott, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So this episode, we've got a couple of things that are happening. One of which obviously is catching up with Tom to see how his deployment project's going. And the other is a rather exciting outing that we had. So I actually left the house and went up to London for the day with some colleagues. So we're going to be telling you all about that shortly.
Yeah, I heard that you had your Vision Pro experience, and I have to say I'm very jealous. As one of the biggest Apple geeks around, I still have not experienced Vision Pro, so I still can't wait to do that someday. We'll see.
We'll have to see who we can talk to make that happen, but hopefully you'll enjoy hearing about how it went for the four of us who were there in London. But before we do that, let's have a listen to what Tom's got to update us about on his deployment project.
Sounds good.
Hi, Tom. I see you're back again. Time for another update on your project.
Yeah. Hi, Victoria. Great to be back. Time sure does fly when you're deploying Macs and iPads all over the place.
It's going well then. Because I know what projects are like. They never, go according to plan, and being on time in a project is nothing short of miraculous.
We're definitely making progress. We had a few hiccups, as we talked about a few episodes ago, but, we're nearing the finish line. It's going to be wrapped up shortly, unfortunately, after the season ends. But I think, as far as our listeners are concerned, we're pretty much at the finish line, and we're just working out a few kinks, and all the major details are put into place. And now it's just pretty much dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure every last little bit is in place.
So I know that we've talked about this before. I think we talked to a number of people about it in season one. One of the concerns that people have when they're moving to a new platform is application compatibility. Is the application that I'm using on my existing operating system, platform, architecture, whatever, going to work on whatever new device or new operating system that I'm using? And we're really reluctant in the technology industry. It's quite interesting to go for something new. We like the familiar. We don't even like it when they change the way our applications look, to be honest. How have you dealt with those concerns? Or have there been concerns along those lines, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, sure, definitely. And I second that. I hate change, and especially as you're developing processes and procedures and all of a sudden something new comes along and you're worried about, is this going to just break everything that I've set so hard to get right over the past X amount of time? In this particular instance, we took an approach from the company that let's assess the applications that are in use and how they affect the fleet as a whole. Some companies like to do this as a persona-based system. They break down their employees into different knowledge worker categories and say, I want my accounting team to have these specific apps, my creatives to have this. In this case, the company took a more top-down approach and said, what are our core apps that we know we want to use? And then we'll worry about who might need specialized apps along the way. And what they found out by taking this approach is that a lot of their core applications were SaaS-based, web-based, whether it was documents or collaboration tools. And that alleviated almost half, if not more, of their concerns, because then they realized all they needed was a web browser. And once they vetted the web browser that they were going to use, that the application worked the same way on a Mac, then there was no concern. So we were able to move quickly with that.
That doesn't deal with your dislike of change, though, Tom, because if you're using SaaS applications, web-based applications, they tend to change without you being even informed about it. So, but yeah, in that situation, it doesn't matter what device you're using, does it?
Correct. If we were going new anyway, it was a concern that could be immediately alleviated. Yeah. And then they found out for the few, for those back office workers that were using a lot of standard applications, those applications work cross-platform and have worked cross-platform for years. So there really wasn't a concern about switching that. Sure, it's a little bit different look on the Mac and a little bit different feel, but the functionality is still the same for a majority of those applications anyway. So once we assessed what apps those back office workers were using and assured them that they were cross-platform, that, a lot of the concerns about having to switch platforms were alleviated. One of the keys to a successful deployment, especially when you're switching platforms, is to encourage people to use the platform, not force them to use the platform. So we don't want to force people into a world that they were unfamiliar with and that would not enable them to effectively do their jobs. So if they had custom macros or workflows or anything specific set up to an application that only ran on a particular platform, and until they were ready to switch to the Mac or until they could replicate their workflow on a Mac, we encouraged them to keep using their platform. And we found out there was only a handful of those employees across the organization, and many were eager to switch to a new device and get a new higher end Mac or an iPad and jump into that world.
There are a lot of similar discussions going on at the moment because we're seeing conversations around AI PCs. What is an AI PC? We're also seeing, obviously, in the Windows space, the increase in uptake of the ARM architecture with the Qualcomm chips. So similar conversations happening there about, will these applications work if I get an app that then has an AI component? What's going to happen if I have got a PC that doesn't qualify as an AI PC? If I move to a different kind of chip, are all my applications going to work? So it sounds like we can take the lessons from this of discovering actually it wasn't as scary and wasn't as complicated and wasn't as problematic as we thought. And we can maybe apply that to, are these AI applications going to work in my environment? Are these different architectures going to work in my environment?
Sure, 100%. And then, if you paid attention to the Apple's announcement in September, they also released their own suite of AI tools and functionality that is coming, and people want to get their hands on those and begin using those. And I think the interesting point that you made, talking about the different chip architectures and switching back and forth, is that Apple hasn't changed their current architecture, that is Apple Silicon, for quite some time now. It's been a few years, and Apple has said that if you own an Apple Silicon based desktop, that is an AI capable PC. So Apple has been at the forefront of using AI PCs for more than a few years now, quite ahead of their Intel counterparts. So your question also about apps running on them, those apps have had years to be vetted and tested and run. So many of the apps that people will say, will this work on an AI PC? Will this work with Copilot and Apple Intelligence? Have actually been vetted for years now. And those features are now just being available to use with those apps. So in essence, all the QA work has already been done. And the testing of those apps to move to new architectures was done years ago. People just didn't necessarily realize they were using an AI capable PC because those buzzwords and that talk in the market has only really taken off within the past year or so.
So really what we're saying is people have a lot of concerns when it comes to change. We tend to worry too much. We're very risk averse about changes in our working environments in particular. Obviously concerns about, impact on the business, on customers, on employees. But quite often a lot of these concerns are unfounded because while we may not be familiar with them as end users, the chances are that someone has actually already done this before. The majority of us are not going to be at the cutting edge of doing new things with technology that nobody else has thought of.
100%. And all these vendors, from Apple to the various MDM vendors to the application vendors, have taken these into consideration and have addressed workflows and usability and user experience. And, they're the ones, obviously, as you mentioned, developing all this stuff. And they've taken these considerations into mind. For us, it might be a new experience and going into the unknown, but someplace has address that question and address the workflow and concerns that we have. It's human nature to feel change. I started out my IT career as a Windows admin, and when I switched to Mac, it was a whole different world. But now, it's one of the things you realize it was an unfounded concern and something that I didn't need to worry about. And, you move forward just as you did with using any other piece of technology.
Well, hopefully the end users at your customer are reassured by the process that they've been through, and hopefully they will all soon be enjoying their new iPads and Macs and feeling that their more effective in their roles than ever. I'm sorry that the project doesn't finish till after the end of the season, but we might be able to sneak back and have a little chat with you and find out, what the end result is. But I'm pretty sure from what you're saying that the end result is going to be a successful deployment and some happy customers and end users once they get used to their new technology.
Yeah, that would be great. And we're already hearing inklings of people talking about this things they do no longer have to do anymore because there's now less repeatable steps and less workflows they have to accomplish to get what they've historically done either manually or through, legacy applications. So I think it's really going to be positive for this company. I think that we're going to see users happy, processes improved, which leads to greater business and greater success for this company.
Well, thank you so much for keeping us updated throughout this season, Tom, and we'll look forward to many more conversations with you, whether they're on We Got Your Mac or whether they're back in the office catching up on things.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks very much.
Are you ready to explore new ways to connect, create, and get work done? Introducing Apple Vision Pro and the era of spatial computing, now available through SHI. With Apple Vision Pro, you can blend your digital content with your physical space and navigate simply by using your eyes, hands, and voice. With a revolutionary operating system and user interface, an infinite canvas for productivity, privacy and security at its core, and unrivaled innovation, you can get work done in ways never before possible. Partner with SHI to solve what's next and change the way you work and connect. If you're interested in experiencing Apple Vision Pro and exploring the possibilities for your business, we can provide you with access to exclusive enterprise apps and demonstrations. Contact your SHI account executive to schedule a briefing or visit us at shi.com/Apple to connect with our team.
So in this section of this episode, we're going to be talking about the Apple Vision Pro experience. We recently went to Apple in London to be taken through what the Vision Pro has to offer. And I was joined in that session by my colleagues, Matt Fisher, Cheryl Slater, and Falgun Saraf. We had a great time there. We've had a lot to talk about since. So I wanted to get them together to discuss with me what we saw, what we experienced, and what their thoughts were about it. So, Cheryl, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I thought the experience was amazing. I think we've heard a lot of talk about Vision Pro, and it definitely lived up to the hype. It just really got my mind going in how many different possibilities there are for our customers, and it's not going to be just one use. It's just like limitless possibilities. So yeah, it was a really exciting experience. It was great to be there with Apple and to see sort of their next big thing, I guess, with that spatial computing device.
So how about you, Falgun? What were your expectations and how did it feel in reality?
Yeah, Victoria. So as soon as I put the headset on, I was really impressed by the sheer clarity and vividness of the display. Particularly the hand gesture controls, the eye tracking was really intuitive. And I think it was like reading my mind, responding to my gaze and movements. We did explore some educational content as well, some educational apps, such as the one where we explored the jet engine turbine and the human heart.
Yeah, that human heart was a bit creepy, wasn't it? Pushing your hands into somebody's body.
It was, but I think it'll be really useful for the education industry because it might create the learning experiences more engaging and effective.
Yeah, and I found that, your point about it kind of almost reading your mind with the eye tracking and the gestures, that was kind of how it felt. So, Matt, what did you take away from the session?
Well, I think the experience brought to life a couple of buzzwords, right? We've all heard about spatial computing and the immersive experience, but I think until you've actually strapped on one of these devices to your head, you don't necessarily know what that means. I think you have to experience it to understand it. So from that point of view, it was incredibly useful and insightful. Where I feel like there's more work to be done is really exploring the knowledge worker use cases. We only got to play with browsing through a browser, and I found that experience wasn't quite as good as I expected it to be. I felt like I was having to push through the image to actually get to control the web page to do what I wanted it to do. So I'm yet to be convinced on the knowledge worker stuff, but on-site engineers, education, medical students, tons of really valuable use cases that we got to see in our visit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you on didn't see enough of the knowledge worker stuff. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Excel in there. As you know, I like spending my time in spreadsheets. But the thing that struck me was that we've seen examples of some of these immersive experiences for industry and for medicine and to a certain extent for education before in standalone devices. But the difference here seems to be that with the Quest and the HoloLens, they're not managed devices. So for an enterprise, there's a potential security and management risk, and they tend to be for one or two use cases. So you'd have your specialist application for your headset, then you take it off to do something else. And the thing that struck me with this is I didn't necessarily need to take the headset off to move from my immersive application doing whatever vertical specific activity I'm doing as an engineer or as a medic. And then I could move into my administrative work while I'm using the same device. And that would then be there when I took the headset off, because as you say, it's not light. I did find my nose twitching initially when I put it on, like you sometimes do with your glasses. But when you take it off, that's then going to be there on your laptop, so you can keep working on the same stuff seamlessly across that ecosystem. So I think Apple have picked up on one of their strengths there, which is that ability to work within this ecosystem and take things from one device to another.
That throws up some challenges as well, though, because if you think about our team, I came away from that session thinking, I could see a ton of use cases even within a marketing team. We build a lot of physical experiences, show booths. We design a lot of multimedia content. I could really see the Vision Pro working well in those environments. But they're only going to work if the other people that you're working with on the team are also in that environment. And so you've got your single user cases, but I think when it comes to working in teams, you're kind of locked into everyone having one of these Vision Pro or whatever follows Vision Pro. It's not a heterogeneous environment where you can have people working together on all sorts of different devices. You have to be in that environment for it to be effective for collaboration.
So in terms of the actual experience itself, I mean, Matt, you've said you probably would have wanted more tailored towards what you can do in marketing. Was there anything else that anybody felt might have been improved other than longer spend watching movies?
I think those consumer use cases are very strong, right? I agree with Falcon. Watching the movie was pretty mind-blowing, but you have to remember that as a business user, you're not buying it for that purpose. That's a nice added benefit that we can now do long-haul flights and not stare at the 2-inch screen in the seat in front of us.
Yeah.
What Apple do offer, and I wish that we'd had it as part of our experience, is like a workshop that you can do as a follow-on to your sort of immersive experience, where you can actually start then working with I'll call them developers. I'm sure Apple would call them something else, but people within Apple who then can help you ideate on what the use cases are, what you would need to do to build out those use cases. Because I don't know the detail of this, but one would imagine if you were looking at building an app from scratch to use on a Vision Pro, you're looking at a major investment there. So perhaps as the system gains in popularity and adoption, we'll see more off-the-shelf stuff, which will bring down the sort of the cost of entry. More organizations will then be inclined to work with it. So that's the bit I wish we'd got into, is more the practical application of it. It blew me away from its capabilities. Now I want to know, how do I actually use it?
Yeah, and I think the one of the interesting discussions has been is, how is this taken beyond the existing use cases for other devices? Because it's really easy to see something we've done in VR or AR. Yeah, you can translate that into spatial computing, but what is there that's different about this?
I think what Apple sort of wanted us to leave with is this idea of anything is possible. So they sort of just give us a small taste, and then they really wanted to just get our minds thinking of all the possibilities rather than them really going deep on the use cases, because they want us to sort of go away and think, wow, it could work for this, or wow, it could work for that. I mean, I've been sort of walking around thinking about different things. To me, that was really exciting, rather than just saying it does this, this, and this. It's what do you think it can do?
So any last thoughts, Matt?
It's not going to be a popular view. I think whatever you think it's going to cost you to adopt Vision Pro, it's more than you think it is. Unless you're just going to buy it as an individual user and you're going to use it as a knowledge worker with an Office suite or, a Mac equivalent of it, all of these use cases are really exciting. Don't get me wrong. I'm super excited by this, but the cost is going to be eye-watering.
I think you're right. There's a lot of money that's going to need to be spent on development and understanding how to actually use these within the enterprise environment.
That's why the knowledge worker scenario is so important, because that's where you're going to get the fastest, most cost-effective adoption. The other use cases, as I say, the ROI is there and they're really exciting, but they're not going to happen in weeks or months. They're probably years. Whereas your knowledge workers, from what they showed us at the experience, they could become productive tomorrow.
That's probably a fair point in terms of timeline. I think the overall return on investment will probably be higher for some of those other use cases where you may be eliminating some fairly costly or potentially dangerous activities with the ability to, provide I see what you see experience or scale the expertise of an individual who doesn't want, can't be in three places at once. So there will be some significant benefits there, but it's going to take a lot of work to get the processes and as well as the technology worked out for how exactly that would happen. So yeah, a lot of exciting things there, a lot of things to think about. And I think certainly some caveats about not jumping feet first into it without really thinking about what the implications might be. But certainly something I think that for many organizations is going to be worth doing some testing and experimentation on, and certainly finding out more about.
All right, those were two really interesting segments. And since you did most of the talking in both of them, I'll go ahead and talk a lot now.
Okay, what did you think then?
So Tom's update, it's nice to hear that there haven't been any other major disruptions. At this point, they're just sort of rolling things out. They're getting close to the end. Sounds like we may need to check in with him at some point in the future just to see how it all wrapped up. But as far as the app compatibility, it is interesting that more and more apps are online, internet based. And so really the platform doesn't matter as much anymore. And I think we've touched on this in previous episodes, at least a couple of times, especially when you're considering employee choice. He talked about they encouraged the users to stick with the platform they were comfortable with. If they were using Windows and they were comfortable with it, that's great. But even still, a lot of those people were excited to get a new Mac, so yeah. It makes sense to offer that employee choice.
Yeah, and I think more and more applications will end up being migrated to the cloud, because eventually the functionality won't be available on the on-prem products, or they'll be hosted in a local data center, even if they're not cloud-based. It's more than just a question of the platform. It's actually giving your organization flexibility in general if that happens. So, but yeah, it's clearly made this deployment a lot easier because they haven't had to worry so much about compatibility.
Yeah, and then moving along to the Vision Pro segment, I think it's really great that Apple is doing this, inviting people to come and use the product, because it's such a personalized experience. It has to be fitted properly. And the point that Cheryl brought up about Apple sort of wanting to give you a taste of what it's like to use it so that then you can go away and think about how you want to use it. It's interesting to me because this seems to be Apple's MO, especially since Steve Jobs. They are becoming more comfortable with letting the market dictate what a product should be. The Apple Watch, I think, is the best example because if you look at the progression of the Apple Watch, when it first came out, they positioned it as a fashion device with a $10,000 model that I think Beyonce and like 2 other people had. And they saw clearly that fashion pitch didn't really work. But the healthcare side of it worked a lot better.
Yeah.
So they really leaned into that with things like atrial fibrillation detection and cycle tracking and sleep apnea now, that kind of thing. So it's interesting to me that really is what they're doing with Vision Pro is they put it out there, they show you what it can do, and now they're just sort of collecting data and waiting to see what it should do in the future.
As you know, because you work with me a lot, I hate being told I need this because it does X, Y, and Z. So for me, certainly, it's much more appealing to being told, here is something, here are the capabilities. I'm not going to try and sell you one now. Go away and think about how you might use it. And the try before you buy thing was really good because when I first put it on, you know, where your glasses kind of rest on your nose and you kind of get a bit sensitive there. It started off and I was thinking, I'm not going to make it through this session. But actually, it settled in quite quickly. There were some things I got used to really quickly, like the gestures. My ability to wave my arms around a lot clearly came into play there because that worked really well for me. But other things, like actually remembering not to stare in front of me as if I was looking at a screen, that was really hard to get used to because even though I could see that it was all around me, I was still thinking in the way that we do, that you have to look at the screen. I wasn't moving within the space in the way that maybe, you know, you would if you spent more time with it. I still haven't quite processed what we might be able to use it for. I can see lots of potential, but working out really specific use cases and working out the ROI, I think I'm a long way off from that. So, and I suspect a lot of other people are. So it is more about, as with generative AI, it's really kind of let's do some proof of concepts. Let's have a play with it. Let's work out where it adds value, where it adds genuine value, and where actually it's just doing something that we can do cheaper and more effectively and more easily with another technology. But it was an exciting thing to do. And I really appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity. We do actually have in the resources section of the wegotyourmac.com, we've got a document that explains how you can request an Apple Vision Pro experience from your SHI account rep. So if you're interested in that, then have a look at it and see if you can try it for yourself. So that's all for this episode. For more episodes, other resources, the blog post that goes with this episode, visit wegotyourmac.com and make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform so that you don't miss a single episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be with you again soon for another episode of We Got Your Mac.